Hello everyone, welcome to another session. Today we will be discussing about the very first step that is involved in the process of genetic engineering. As we all know, we have started the unit biotechnology and the lesson biotechnology principles and processes. And as per the definition of biotechnology, we understood that biotechnology is the production of goods and services on a large scale in which the raw material involved is essentially biological material, and the designing of the product involves usage of recombinant techniques, right? So what are the two core areas of biotechnology? As I told you, the first important area is to design a recombinant DNA molecule or to design the product which involves the usage of recombinant DNA techniques. Now once you design the product, now this product should be cultured, or it should be, you have to optimize the conditions in which you can produce the product on a large scale, right? So the two core areas of biotechnology, one area is to design a product which essentially should use the recombinant DNA techniques, and the other area is to optimize the conditions in which you can produce the product on a large scale, right? Now, let us look into the steps of genetic engineering. So, in order to produce a product on a large scale and get the product, we have so many steps. So, the very first step is isolation of the DNA. So, here it's a multi-step process actually. In this multi-step process, the first thing that we have to do is isolate the DNA. The very first step is to break open a cell, collect the DNA in its purest form. Now once you get the DNA, you are using this DNA and it is subjected for restriction digestion. Now in restriction digestion, we are breaking the long DNA molecule into shorter fragments. Once you get the fragments, you are supposed to separate the fragments based on their size in a process called gel electrophoresis. Now once the gel electrophoresis is done, we are using the fragment of DNA that contains the desired piece to construct the recombinant DNA molecule. Now, once the recombinant DNA is designed, you are inserting it into a host cell in a process called transformation. Now the transformed cell should be selected. Why? Because screening is important, because not all the host cells have taken up the recombinant DNA molecule. For this reason, you have to select the recombinant host which contains the recombinant DNA molecule. Once that process is done, we have the recombinant host which should be cultivated or cultured on a large scale so that we can get the desired product. And the process by which we are going to collect the product or harvest the product is called as downstream processing. So my dear friends, this is the roadmap that is involved in designing and culturing the product and getting the biotechnological product. Now here, let us look into the first step. Our class today is focusing on the very first step of biotechnology, that is isolation of DNA. Extraction and isolation of DNA, the first step of genetic engineering. So as you all know, DNA is a genetic material universally, right? Whether you take a bacterial cell, an algae, fungi, plant or an animal cell, every cell is invariably having DNA as a genetic material. So can you tell me an subcellular entity which has either DNA or RNA as a genetic material? Yes, it is the virus. Because virus carries either DNA or RNA as genetic material and virus does not have the cellular structure, we cannot consider virus as a cell. In fact, it is neither living nor non-living, right? So, except for virus, every other living organism is having DNA as a genetic material. Now, why should we isolate the DNA? We want to perform the experiment. Can't we get the DNA in its purest form? Can't we take it directly? No. That is because DNA is not available in its purest form, right? So what can we do to isolate it? So if you want to isolate the DNA, first you should know the location of DNA in a cell. So as you all know, in a prokaryotic cell like bacterium, your DNA is freely floating in a form of nucleoid in the cytoplasm, right? So in a prokaryotic cell, the DNA, the chromosome is freely floating in the cytoplasm, whereas in a eukaryotic cell, it is enclosed within a membrane. In fact, in a eukaryotic cell, you find the DNA enclosed in a membrane within the nucleus. Apart from this, a eukaryotic cell is also having extra chromosomal DNA in the form of mitochondrial DNA and chloroplast DNA, right? So if you get a question like this, what are the extra chromosomal DNA locations in a eukaryotic cell? It should be mitochondria and chloroplast. Whereas in a bacterial cell, the extra chromosomal DNA will be your plasmid DNA. So for a prokaryotic cell, plasmid DNA is the extra chromosomal DNA, whereas for a eukaryotic cell, mitochondrial and chloroplast DNA is called as the extra chromosomal DNA, right? Now, how can we get the DNA that is located within the membranes of the cell? Quite simple. We have to break open the cell. We have to literally tear the cell and collect all the extract from the cell. And the process by which we break open the cell and collect all the intracellular fluid is called as the cell disruption. So essentially, you take a cell, you break the cell wall and collect all the cellular extract, and that process is called as cell disruption, right? Now we have many cell disruption methods, right? The mechanical methods and non-mechanical methods. So previously mechanical methods were highly popular, but currently we are employing enzymatic methods. So once you break the cell and collect the cell extract contains thousands of biomolecules, right? So it majorly contains the DNA, RNA, protein, polysaccharides and lipids. So literally you are breaking the cell just like how you break a coconut. And once you break it, all the liquid extract, the cell extract. So once you break the cell extract consists of two parts majorly. One part is the cellular debris, that is containing the broken membranes, and rest of it, the liquid phase, will contain the biomolecules of lesser molecular mass. Now, our task is to isolate the DNA in its purest form from this cell extract. Let us see what we have to do. So before getting into the steps of isolation and purification of DNA, can you tell me the difference between extraction and isolation? How are they different from each other? These are two similar words, but they are not really identical. They don't have an identical meaning. So here, extraction is a process. It's a separating a compound from a mixture which is having low purity. Extraction means you are pulling out something, right? And that particular compound is not essentially the purest form. It can also contain some other compounds along with it which are quite similar in their size and other properties. So whenever we use the term extraction, the compound which is extracted is not necessarily pure. It can have other compounds as well. Whereas when you say it is isolation, isolation essentially involves pulling out of a DNA molecule completely, pulling out of any molecule for that matter, not only DNA, where essentially it is in its purest form. And for this reason, extraction and isolation are two different terms in the context of chemistry, right? So the first step we are going to do is extraction of DNA, and the second step is isolation or purification of DNA. So if you look into the enzymatic disruption methods, so what kind of enzyme you have to employ depends on the type of cell you are using. Why? Because each cell has its own cell wall composition, right? So depending on the type of the cell that we are using, we need to employ that particular enzyme. Let us have a look at the bacterial cell. Suppose our sample cell is a bacterial cell. As we all know, bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan, right? And the enzyme that we need to use to break this peptidoglycan is the lysozyme. You know what is lysozyme, right? Lysozyme is antibactericidal enzyme that we find in tears, saliva, etc. Now, a bacterial cell is essentially having a cell wall which is made up of peptidoglycan. In order to break the peptidoglycan, you have to use the enzyme lysozyme. Now let us see how. So what is the basic structure and composition of a peptidoglycan layer? Peptidoglycan layer is essentially made up of repeated units of NAG and NAM. What is this NAG and NAM? These are derived sugars, N-acyl glucosamine and N-acyl muramic acid. So here each chain of peptidoglycan is made up of repeated units of N-glucosamine and N-acyl muramic acid. Now these are the derived sugars. These two are the derived sugars. Now these two sugars are held together by means of glycosidic linkage, and lysozyme is going to break this glycosidic linkage. So remember, when you have to break the bacterial cell, you have to make use of an enzyme called lysozyme. Lysozyme will target the bacterial cell wall. Since the bacterial cell wall is made up of derived sugar units, the sugar units together are held together by glycosidic bonds, and lysozyme is going to cleave the bond between this. The bond is glycosidic bond, and this bond is cleaved by the lysozyme. So here let us see what is the location or what is the way by which lysozyme is going to break the bacterial cell wall. So as I told you, the peptidoglycan layer is made up of two units. This is the composition of the peptidoglycan. It is made up of two derived sugars which are repeated again and again. One is N-acyl glucosamine and the other one is N-acyl muramic acid. Now this unit is repeated continuously to form long chains of sugars called as glycans. And if this is the glycan chain, the sugar chain, they are having cross links made up of the peptides, that is short amino acid chains. And that is the reason it has got the name peptidoglycan. Now if we want to break this chain, we are employing the enzyme lysozyme, right? Now what is the site of action of lysozyme? Lysozyme can essentially cleave the glycosidic bond. This is the action, site of action of lysozyme. Lysozyme is going to cleave the glycosidic bond that is present between these two sugars, right? Now, if our sample is a fungal cell, what are we going to do? As it is, fungal cell wall is made up of chitin. Chitin is again a derived sugar. So where we came across chitin, can you remember? Yes, we have learnt it in the lesson biomolecules of class 11, where we have learnt about chitin as a derivative of sugar, a complex sugar. So the chemically chitin is nothing but N-acyl glucosamine. N-acyl glucosamine. So now in this case, we have to employ the enzyme called chitinase, right? So as you can see here, depending on the type of the cell and the nature of the cell wall, the type of enzyme that should be applied is variable. Now if we talk about the plant cell, as we all know, plant cell is made up of cellulosic cell wall. And what is your cellulose essentially? Again, it is a polymer of, it's a linear polymer of beta D glucose units, right? Remember, cellulose is a linear polymer of beta D glucose units. Even about cellulose we have learnt in the lesson biomolecules. Now what is the enzyme that we are supposed to use here? It is cellulases, right? So when the cell wall is made up of cellulose, the enzyme that we have to use is cellulase. So this is the ultrastructure of the plant cell wall. So in your plant cell wall, cellulose is essentially found in the form of cellulosic microfibrils. Cellulosic microfibrils. Now, if you look at the ultrastructure of a plant cell wall, you have the background as a pectin. Pectin will act as a matrix, right? Now within this pectin wala matrix, you have the cellulosic microfibrils arranged like this, and these cellulosic microfibrils are linked or attached together, or they were held together with the help of hemicellulose, right? Hemicellulose. Now coming to the animal cell, what kind of enzyme we are supposed to apply? What is the nature of animal cell wall? Animal cell has no cell wall at all, right? So in this case, because animal cell is not having any cell wall, we need not use any enzyme, but we can use mechanical methods or non-mechanical methods like osmotic lysis and sonication. And this is how we are going to cleave the cell and collect the cell extract, right? Now once we get the cell extract, what does cell extract contain? Cell extract majorly contains biomolecules and thousands of metabolites. Now these biomolecules majorly consist of the DNA, RNA, that is the nucleic acids, proteins, polysaccharides and lipids. So can you tell me which is the most abundant biomolecule in the cell? Is it the protein or the nucleic acid? Yes. Now here, out of all these 4 major biomolecules, we are supposed to remove the RNA by using ribonuclease enzyme. Protein should be removed by protease wala enzyme. Lipids should be removed with the help of lipases. So here, the major contaminants in the cell extract in this context are RNA, proteins and lipids. And we are supposed to remove all these contaminants with the help of the respective enzymes. Now once you remove all these contaminants, we will be left with the DNA, the crude extract of the DNA. But since DNA is always in association with histone proteins, you don't find the DNA in its purest form even in the cell. It takes the help of histone proteins and packs itself tightly in a eukaryotic cell. And for this reason, even this DNA is not the purest form. But still, it is this DNA that is actually isolated from the sample. So what do we do here is, now by this time, your DNA is in the soluble form. In your test tube, your DNA is in a soluble form. DNA in association with proteins is in its soluble form. In the next step, we are going to add chilled ethanol to this solution, and we are converting the DNA into insoluble form, right? The process by which the soluble DNA is converted to insoluble form by addition of chilled ethanol is called as ethanol precipitation. So as you can see here, this is the cell extract with which we are working. Once we removed all the major contaminants, we find the DNA in its soluble state. But once you add chilled ethanol to this, what the ethanol does is, since your DNA is having negative charge, overall negative charge, it is in its ionic form and so in a soluble state, ethanol will enhance the interaction between the negatively charged DNA and the salts, cationic salts. So basically, for anything, any chemical species to be in its soluble state, it should be in its ionic form. Now here, DNA being negatively charged, it is soluble in water, in this extract. But now, what we did, we added chilled ethanol. By addition of chilled ethanol, the cations that are present in the cell extract started interacting with the negatively charged DNA, and this is how the whole DNA became neutral. Now once the DNA had become neutral, it can no more be in its soluble state, and this leads to precipitation of DNA. Precipitation of DNA. Yes? So the basic chemistry underlying this ethanol precipitation is very, very simple. DNA being negatively charged was quite soluble in the cell extract. By addition of chilled ethanol, the cationic salts started interacting. Ethanol will promote the interaction between the salts and the DNA. Now because the cationic salts are interacting with the negatively charged DNA, the whole DNA became neutral. It has no charge. In an uncharged state, in a neutral state, the DNA is no more soluble in that extract, and so it turned into a precipitate. Now you can see visibly, as soon as you add ethanol, you can see the white precipitate of DNA, just like this image. So this is how the ethanol is added through the walls of the test tube. And this is the white mass of DNA along with some amount of protein in it. Now the collection of these fine threads. Now how do we pull out this precipitate of DNA? So from the glass tube, you have to pull out the DNA with the glass rod. ये है ना glass rod, and this is the DNA fibers. The DNA fibers are seen at the bottom of the test tube. You insert the glass rod and pull out the DNA fibers carefully without disturbing the layer of ethanol. ये है layer of ethanol. So the process by which the insoluble white mass of DNA fibers are pulled out with the help of glass rod is called as spooling. And this is how you are able to pull out the mass of DNA fibers into a fresh test tube, and this is your purified sample of DNA. Right? So with this, we have completed the very first step, that is isolation and purification of DNA. In the next class, we will be discussing about the restriction endonucleases.